Hey, shalom, family. Shalom, Shabbat, shalom. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everything is okay with my sound and I'm coming through clearly. So please let me know. Just place a one in the chat if the sound is coming through okay. All right. Can you hear me okay? Mic check, mic check. All right. Sounds good. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, brother. I'm going to share this stream link. A couple of the Ox will be coming in later, and we will share the stream this week. I know last week one of the brothers was asking. I didn't catch it during the time of the stream, but we will share a link later in the conversation, allowing people to come in and touch on the topic. So today we'll be touching on a topic, as you can see the title, Judgment, Government, Education, and the independence of a people. All right. And what prompted this conversation is, I'm sure many of you brothers are aware that in Africa right now, you see many African countries looking to expel the French from their borders and operate independently. And depending on your worldview, you might consider them the same people as us, depending on where they descend from, so on and so forth. That really isn't so much the discussion, but it prompts the discussion as to where we are as a people, those of the diaspora, those as followers, believers in the Messiah who seek to become independent or autonomous as a people. What are the practical steps that need to be taken? So I first want to look at an article, because this is not the first time we see something like this. And we're going to bring it to the scriptures because it all deals with the independence of a people. If you look at that as community building, nation building, and we really want to touch on that. So this is Pursuits of Virtue, where we explore the traits, characteristics that allow a man to reach his highest level of maturation and strength. And ideally, with men going God's way, not only do we build the men up, look to be built up and build other brothers up, but then make a collective where brothers come together and produce that independence. We speak first beginning spiritually, a brother building up himself as an individual, his family, his community, and then we come together. So I'm going to begin sharing this article, okay, because this isn't the first time this happened. And I just want to set the stage before we go into the scriptures, different readings, and we look at all of these things: judgment, government, education, and the independence of a people. So let's see here. All right. This is a article, and it's titled Idi Amin's Expulsion of Asians in 1972 Pummeled Uganda's Economy. Right. So Idi Amin was a leader of Uganda, ultimately finding himself with complete power in a country. He was able to expel Asian Indians, or what we would call East Indians. And we just want to look at exactly how he did what he did in the state that it put the people in after he made that decision. Right. So as you see here, in August 1972, Ugandan dictator Idi Amin ordered the expulsion of some 80,000 Asians or Indians by giving them 90 days to leave the country. So he is classified, at least through the Western lens, as a dictator, but dictatorship, T-ism, errorism is in the like beauty in the eyes of the beholder. So you never know entirely what drives people. And depending on where you fall, the captured would determine how you view that. But he earned the moniker Big Daddy, was one of Africa's most notorious and ruthless dictators. He saw himself as a self-styled president for life, lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea, and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general, and Uganda in particular. So we just first want to look at the economic devastation, right? I'm going to bring this all together when we go through the scriptures. But I want to set the stage for a practical and truthful conversation, because us, what you would call the quote unquote truth, right? Our belief, the awakening, the diaspora, it's a lot of it is rooted in ideology and theory. But we do have opportunities to do research, to deal with self-assessment, what we are capable of as a people independently, to really look and see where we are so we can then begin to build, right? So economic devastation, right? And it reads, the expulsion of the Asians, the nationalization of their businesses, and the expansion of the public sector wrecked Uganda's economy. The real value of salaries and wages plummeted by 90% in less than a decade. So, in layman's terms, right, Uganda was a country. They had an economy, right? They had businesses. They dealt with exports. The GDP, they did fairly well, right? They were operating as a country. But as you see, a lot of that was due to the East Indians being in their country. They were expelled. So Idi Amin, the dictator, said, hey, everything is being returned to Ugandans. We're going to do it, right? So within less than a decade, the salaries and wages plummeted by 90%. The impact of and I would say, brothers, if you can, always look and check, because they control the narrative. I've tried to find the exact numbers on the GDP. I've only been able to find articles, and these are just normal articles. So don't take my word for it. Don't take the article's word for it, right? But it says the impact of the expulsions on the economy was startling. Gross domestic product fell by 5% between 1972 and 1975, while manufacturing output tumbled from 740 million Ugandan shillings in 1972 to 254 million shillings in 1979. The biggest losers from the expulsion, not the Asians, but the Ugandan people. So what does this mean, right? What does this mean? Let's talk about it. So we all know within our community, we understand that biblical prophecy does allude to a time where the grid of the world powers will collapse, and it will be a tough time, a difficult time, even for believers. And most people do come to a conclusion that you will have to somewhat be independent to be able to survive. And even without waiting for the grid to collapse, if we look at and consider the liberal agenda, it would be in people's, as believers, your best interest to be independent and autonomous as a people, able to self-educate, able to convert resources, so on and so forth, right? And so most people come to the conclusion through research, gold is the most valuable natural resource, right? Gold. And when we look at it, you say, okay, yeah, because currency was created, and it was a paper certificate allegedly supposed to be backed by gold. But we know since the advent of that, that's no longer today. But now currency is just a mutual agreement. It's basically a fictitious agreement. If America's trillions of dollars in debt, then we just agree that this is the value of it. The market determines what it's worth. And when we say gold is the most valuable resources, a person would then think, okay, well, I need gold so that if something goes wrong, I can still participate in trading. I can still participate and bartering because this is the most valuable natural resource. Now, that is true. Two people that can convert resources. But if I have gold, right, at this moment in time, I am unable to convert gold. So even if I have gold, its value is no different than a paper certificate because I will have to go to the people that can convert gold and they will be able to dictate the gold's value, right? They will dictate it. So it isn't a natural resource that's valuable unless you can convert it. And even the greatest homesteaders still use coal. They still use things to where they have to participate in trading. And the success of a country, the success of a people is their independence, their ability, their GDP, meaning the value of the country, the money they spend, the money that the goods that they can take on the world stage that everybody else needs and only they can produce. So in theory, right, a lot of people are excited. They say, hey, Africa's standing up to France. But the better question is can Africa sustain? And it's sad because you see many of these Western countries, mostly everything they have is imported. And it would make you think, how can they sustain? How can they import everything? 80%. They don't create it, but they have the knowledge, the know-how to actually convert these resources and make use of them, which brings us to the topic today, right? And so I really wanted to touch mainly on education, right? And because that was I wanted to really look at the ancestors, the forefathers, and see how they viewed it. If they just classified things as, well, that's the Europeans or that's the nations, that belongs to the other nations, therefore we don't partake in it. We just lock ourselves in rooms, read spiritual books, and be deep, and now we'll be delivered. I really wanted to touch on that, but the truth is I can't, because when you really look at what allows a people to flourish, a community, and we'll touch on education for sure, but it does start with government. It starts with judgment. And these are the things, believe it or not, right? A lot of times y'all might hear me say the saying, let's take off the over righteous goggles, right? And I don't mean to really jest when I say that, but I mean just so we can look at this thing properly. America is an example, right? The scriptures tells you in Proverbs 14:34 that righteousness exalteth a nation and sin is a reproach to any people. Am I saying that America is righteous? That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the Bible is made up of universal laws. So if a nation say, we're not going to embrace all of the Bible, but just when it comes to matters of, let's say, commerce, right, we'll agree with biblical teaching. When it comes to matters of morality, right, we'll deal with biblical teaching. Well, that people will benefit from that alone, because the Most High established the universe in truth, in accordance with truth, in perfect balance. So if you choose to take, all right, we'll just ascribe to this. So what America did, or the West, going back to the time of King Alfred, you can read these things. They would read the Bible. He'd read the Bible literally and see, well, what can be applied, right? Obviously, some of these things don't prophesy or foretell of our ultimate success, so we can't embrace it all, because we'd end up giving it over. We'd have to restore people, so we're going to have to build this thing on blood. But as much as we can do correctly, we want to reap the benefits of that because it's correct. So when you look at people being willing to die to cross the border, you look at, I was watching something recently, and I really wanted to set the stage, right? I was watching something recently where there was a family of expats. They were in Africa and they had high school children, and they were in an African country. And it was West Africa. It might have been the Gambia. It might have been Ghana. And they sent their children to school, and the brother, his daughter, went into the classroom with woke rhetoric, and the teachers looked at her like she was crazy, right? They understand that it isn't perfect, but the things that we can benefit from the West and bring back to build our country, nah, we don't, we aren't talking about, they're not doing the Pan-African thing there. That isn't real. So we really have to look at this thing with the level of discernment to see where we can benefit, what we can observe, right, in our dwelling places, and then take these things to then in turn build our people. So again, this is, let me get the title because it was a little long, right? We're going to touch on a few different things here. All right. So that really sets the stage. And I said, I can't just hop into that. Let's look at it all, right? So judgment, government, education, and the independence of a people, because all of this lends to that, right? The independence of a people. So since the turn of the century, right, there's been a spiritual phenomenon taking place concerning the inappropriately called black man, brown man, right? And for those of us who have given the time to learn and understand our true origin, we can agree that many of the scriptures foretell of our plight, where we will find ourselves at different spaces in time. And one of those things say in Deuteronomy 28 and 37, you shall become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword among all the peoples, where the highest shall send you away. And it can be clearly observed that these people will have assimilated and be led astray into cultures that do not quite belong to them nor were made for them, right? I don't say that statement to acquire pity, but to instead examine practical steps and solutions for the betterment and independence of our people. So we'll start and we'll think of every ethnicity, every nation of people individually as one man, right? And determine his age and worth by his success, his independence, and his autonomy. We would then be forced to consider our people in today's current times as a child walking in on the world stage and left to sink or swim. He must learn to adopt methods that are beneficial, not being too prideful to deny instruction and observe the things that work, but also shrewd enough to cast away methods that are destructive, right? And as the young man sets on his journey, he's given one rule from his father regarding his preliminary instruction. His father says to him firmly, son, as to the instructions I have given you, keep therefore and do them. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the men you are set to go against, which shall hear all of these instructions and say, surely this great man is a wise and understanding man, right? So I would now like to examine the young man's beginning and that of his peers to determine what is necessary for that man to survive. So I'm going to begin here. There was a saying, and it says, and it was in a book or like a address. It was a guy named Ernst Renan, right? And the famous formulation of Ernst Renan. And what he said was, a nation is a soul, a spiritual principle, two things which in truth are but one, constitute this soul or spiritual principle. One lies in the past, one in the present. One is the possession in common of a rich legacy of memories. The other is present day consent, the desire to live together, and the will to perpetuate the value of the heritage that one has received, right? So the desire to live together and the will to perpetuate, to continue the value of the heritage that one has received, okay? So we'll first deal with judgment, right? And this might, the judgment and the government part might be something we'll touch more on in depth next week, but I still needed to set the stage because we're looking at the steps that would be needed. All right. We're looking at the steps that would be needed to establish this independence and this success as a people. Okay. So, all right. So, component one would be order and law. Order and law. Okay. So, the meaning of Deuteronomy is second law, right? And so we'll begin here. Okay. We'll begin here. I'm going to go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 1. Okay. I'll go to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 5, but we'll be starting in Deuteronomy 1. Right. All right. Let's see. Right. And there's also a book I'm going to share it. It's titled War Memory and National Identity in the Hebrew Bible by Jacob Wright. And one of the statements he made that was interesting to me and I think is valuable. He said, however, the formation of the Hebrew Bible itself must be studied as an experiment in nation making if it is to be properly understood. War Memory and National Identity in the Hebrew Bible. Okay. So let me get my Bible pulled up here, and eventually I'm gonna be bringing brothers on, and we'll have readers. It might be more efficient that way, but I just want to touch on a few things, and I have a lot to say, so I don't want to interrupt too much. But I'm here in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 5, right? And it reads, on this side Jordan in the land of Moab, Moses began to declare this law, saying, right? I'm going to hop down to verse 8. Behold, I have set the land before you. Go in and possess the land which the Most High swore unto your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to give unto them and to their seed after them. Right? I'm going to jump down to verse 13. Take ye wise men and understanding and known amongst your tribes, and I will make them rulers over you. Right? So we can see before the multitude was given entry into the land, a form of government was established. Prior to this, Moses was the sole authority of the people. But we now see delegation being passed down to men of a certain standard, having to be wise and understanding, and not according to one's own opinion of himself, right? But instead to be considered to have these attributes amongst the masses. We see this in most democracies, as there is some form of voting which requires the candidates to have a good reputation, education, and conscience worthy of being given power and influence amongst people. Now, one must wonder how these men are to develop the wisdom and decision-making skills worthy of being judges amongst the people. And if we were to consider that, when we look in our community, for instance, and then we'll compare it to America, because that's a big thing, saying everything that's wrong with America. But if you consider what it takes to be a judge, you start off, you go to school, maybe 8 years, then you start as a defendant's lawyer or prosecutor for years, having an in-depth understanding of the law, the procedures, and then you become a judge, right? And even then, judges aren't celebrities. It's an honorable position. It's well acknowledged, but it isn't something where judges can use individual discretion, to where amongst our community it becomes a thing of, I know God better than you do, so listen to me. And we don't even see that in the Bible. Like that's really a Western thing, because if you go back after this time, right, and the Most High dealt with our people face to face at this time, and we were Eastern people, so it wasn't a similar culture to what we see today, where we are individualists, right? We're individualists. Brothers should become familiar with high context culture as opposed to low context culture. And just if you just look at people in the Far East, it's a different mindset. But then when you look at what constituted men being leaders, say during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, it wasn't a private thing of saying like we read the same thing and I get a better take than you get. It was no, we literally understand the language where nobody else does, right? You can't understand it because we've been led away captive, right? We can, so we have to tell you what it says, how to do it. And at that point in time, I believe that was around that time was the first Edomite conversion, then going into the different forces taking over the people, and now you get the splintered off of Judaism today. But even back then they weren't dealing with the Tanakh, dealing with the scriptures in that way, but just circumcision and the keeping of the feast days, the law of strangers, right? Even in the book of Esther, you read, and many people became Jews, but that's something else. But not saying that we have to go to them today. That's what I'm clarifying. But we're dealing with what would constitute that government, right? What would constitute that government? It wouldn't be a private interpretation of, just being quote unquote more spiritual. It would be a very orthodox thing, like you see in men going God's way, not really as a selling point, but you see practical tenets that would determine a man's influence or authority, right? That's one of the first steps to where we have to separate from a Western mind of individualism and preeminence to where God is talking to me and he'll talk to me through, he'll talk to me and then I'll let you know what he says. That has to be eradicated, right? And we see that. We see the West that's been a leader in judicial and legislation, right? We can look and see some of the order while we can say and we can complain, okay, slavery this, slavery that, but you see people are fighting and dying to get here. Not to say that this is okay, this is the example, but we have to learn from these things, okay? So I'm gonna get back in Deuteronomy. It's just discretion. I'm not saying that this is the place to be, right? The ideal, we know the Most High is the ideal judge, but we can't scoff at it because we don't do better than it, as a community. All right. So this is Deuteronomy 1, chapter 1, verse 16, right? And it reads, "And I charged your judges at that time, saying, hear the causes between your brethren, and judge righteously between every man and his brother and the stranger that is with him. You shall not respect persons in judgment, but you shall hear the small as well as the great. You shall not be afraid of the face of man, for the judgment is God's, and the cause that is too hard for you, bring it unto me, and I will hear it." Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay. "Bring it unto me, and I will hear it." Okay. So law and fairness is the most crucial component for welfare and common good amongst a group of people. It protects the individual from mistreatment and creates trust between the community and its leaders. The law lets us know what is right and fair. The law is to be established in such a way that everyone can expect that if they do the right thing, they will be protected, and if they do wrong, they will be punished, irrespective of status, lineage, or riches. This will promote well-doing in all affairs. If a nation compromises this for any reason, it will begin to slowly deteriorate through a domino effect of lawlessness, where opportunity and advantage will begin to rule over certain person's conscience rather than that which is right. And we see that where the United States goes off because there's such a thing as lobbying, right? To where now political leaders and factions, it isn't based in even the idea of a prosecutor and a defendant's lawyer, right? If I'm a prosecutor, no matter what, it's my job to prove this person's guilt. That's unjust, right? I have a vested interest in the failure of this person rather than a desire of truth. So it's balance. It's balance, but we can still observe, right, and get an understanding of certain components that are good. You see judges. I watch different. You have different law channels on YouTube that stream live cases, and they go through and find interesting ones. And you'll see situations where a judge might say, "Now, wow, I believe this person is guilty. I do. I don't think the story makes sense, but it's the prosecutor's job to prove without any doubt that this person was guilty of it, and I don't think that you've done that." And it makes me respect the person a great deal that has that ability to step outside of themselves and judge righteously and strict adherence to a code. And with men going God's way, you see there were the tenets and saying, okay, if a man can meet all these tenets, we'll vote with these men, whatever it is, right? We must adhere to that code. And that goes back into the early establishment of America, to where a man had to have land, because land meant that a man had certain characteristics of independence, right? He had a certain level of mental acuity, certain strength, certain intellect, work ethic, and that social status came by the ownership of land, which said, okay, he can vote. But there were many European people that couldn't vote, right? Because you had to own land, you had to be qualified. And so you take the year process to say, all right, one brother, you might meet one trait, you might meet this, but we all gonna build together, we're gonna work, and we're gonna get there. Because when you do that prematurely, a lot of things, not, and this is not about anybody in particular, any organization, any leader in particular, because I don't do that, right? But what I will say, a lot of things that happen, it's because people don't take 1 Timothy 3 literally, right? When Paul is saying, hey, if a person's family, right, if they don't master the small things within their environment, such as their home, having an honorable wife, because we're all governors in our own right, right? That's what your home is, right? You know, the education of the people, the success of the people, the development of the people. That's what a man is, right? He presides over his home. That's the small scale. That's the training ground. And success in that would then translate over into the community, right? You would take the men amongst you that they're like, okay, yeah, that's good, right? You do it on a smaller level, so come do this. Have their fatherless people, their widows, now assist them as well, and not taking that literally. You'll have people that have more authority over other people's lives than they do in their own home, and that's backwards. And that's why you see different instances of sometimes people being, disgruntled, feeling as if they were done wrong because those things weren't done in order, right? That's what ends up happening. So these are things to consider when you take a vote. This is why they have the slander campaigns trying to bring up a person's shame, to say, see, he's not honorable. You can't trust him in a position over you, right? Not saying that that's right, but that even our psyche tells us this is true, right? So verse 18, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 18 says, and I commanded you at that time all the things which ye should do. So the advantage to actually being an Israelite is that we were given the perfect laws. These laws, which are intangible, but can be compared to weighing scales which are never imbalanced, right? If anything is taken away from the scales, as is the case with sin, there is a perfect judgment evenly distributed to bring balance. This causes the scales to never be disproportionate or out of order. Moses was given these instructions, which were then passed down to men who he proverbially poured his spirit upon. In practical terms, such is to say that he taught and instructed them in the way of righteousness, right? They were given a tutelage in a law school, right? So these were men with real life experience, discipline, maturity that was required in addition to education and understanding of the scriptures, men of esteem, integrity, and that were an example, right? And so Proverbs 29:2 reads, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. So this gives us a mindset, of government to think as, emperors, lords, nobles. But that's something that isn't really privy to our people. Or if it is, many of us are familiar with the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. It becomes a thing where they're it's like when the scriptures speak about Hellenes, right? They've adopted the customs and the mindset of the Greeks. So though we might share the same blood, they've been converted to a different worldview. So for us as believers, we sort of have to get the best of both worlds, and that's difficult. That's difficult sometimes, because you cross over in The Miseducation of the Negro. The author, he spoke of the anger that sometimes would be felt when people would go get the education and they would come back and have to deal with their own people. So we're going to finish up on the judgment and government here first, but I want to read Psalms 101 because this is a good something that it's a good thing to read as thinking as an emperor or as a position of authority or government, right? It puts us in that mind. Okay. So I'm going to read Psalms 101. All right. So it reads, I will sing of faithfulness and justice. I'm reading in the JPS Tanakh, by the way. I will chant a hymn to you, O Lord. I will study the way of the blameless. When shall I attain it? I will live without blame in my house. I will not set before my eyes anything base. I hate crooked dealings. I will have none of it. Perverse thoughts will be far from me. I will know nothing of evil. He who slanders his friend in secret, I will destroy. I cannot endure the haughty and proud man. My eyes are on the trusty men of the land, to have them at my side. He who follows the way of the blameless shall be in my service. He who deals deceitfully shall not live in my house. He who speaks untruth shall not stand before my eyes. Each morning I will destroy all the wicked of the land, to rid the city of the Lord of all evildoers. And one of the things we see with David, as far as a commitment to a code, is when the man who killed his enemy came to him to give the report and say Saul is no more, and in the hopes and in thoughts of saying this will get me a position, this will get me an authority. You see, David, even at his own advantage, was so strict in adherence to the code to where he still carried out the judgment on that man, right? So you see there, that's like when Moses was being told, establish get these types of people around you. These are people to where if Moses would have went off, they would have got him out of there, right? So that's the type of mind when you establish a really strong government to where even in the face of death, right? And that's just something to ponder on, because I don't I know that that's a difficult thing, right? If it brought the Messiah to a point to where he even asked that it be undone, I don't take it as a light thing. But I do understand that if I say for the greater good, I'm willing to die. Everything else between life and death will be easy. And that type of success, that type of conviction and commitment with people united together, you'll have great success. So I'm going to share my screen again because I want to touch on a couple more things before we go into education. Because what prompted this discussion, if you came in late, we are considering France, their relations with Africa, their expulsion from the land. And in 1972, we began reading an article where Idi Amin, who was the leader of Uganda, expelled all Eastern Indians, right? And they were responsible for much of the commerce. And he expelled them within 90 days. Within 10 years, the economy collapsed. And the reason being was because the Ugandans didn't have the necessary skills. They didn't know, industry. They didn't know conversion of natural resources. So even though people were given high positions over warehouses and textile manufacturers, they didn't know how to do it. And within 10 years, it was done. The economy was shot. And so other people can benefit from these things. We speak about in theory how rich the land of Africa is, but it's like gold to us, even though we know that gold, or we're told and believe it, that gold is the most valuable natural resource because of how many things it can be converted into. If I do not possess the necessary skills to actually convert the gold in a time of need, in a time of the collapse of a grid, gold is only paper currency to me because I have to take it to the people who can, and they will dictate the value. So yes, it is something that initially sounds liberating to say, okay, Africa's taking the land back, but now you have to look. And not only that, when the Western countries or the EU sense certain independence, they don't immediately rush to war like they did with Gaddafi, right? That's the last resort because you need a certain perception amongst the world, right? But what they'll do is they make trading difficult for you, sanctions. So now, even if you do take control over the things you have, if you aren't completely independent, right, the things that you need, like rice, right, oil, different things of this nature, they put extra taxes on it. They tax the waters, right? So the people, when you get imports and exports, they have to charge you more. And now if you get around all of that, you have to be prepared and willing and able to successfully defend your land too. So those are the components. So it's the first step, right? And you wish those people the best, but as a people, right, that at least desire to deal with our own communities and our autonomy, and who knows what that can become. This is the mindset that we have to be in. And so the first component of that independence is what I view as judgment. And again, later on, we'll be taking some calls. So I want to hear what you brothers think, on that road to independence, right? So I'm going to share my screen now, because right now we're dealing with judgment, government, putting brothers in the mind of nobles, leaders capable of governing, right? So let me see here. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. And I'll be checking the comments if there's any, but let me see here. Um, one moment. Okay. Let's see here. All right. This should be it. All right. Okay. So, justice, government, education, and the independence of a people. So, I just want to finish up on judgment, right? Government and the mindset you should be in, because that's what bands the people together. It's what protects people in their dealings on a communal and interpersonal level. It's law, it's judgment. And we see that was the first thing that the Most High passed down, right? We read this already, right? But I'll go over it one more time as it read in the famous formulation of Ernst Renan. A nation is a soul, a spiritual principle. Two things, which in truth are but one, constitute this soul or spiritual principle. One lies in the past, one in the present. One is the possession in common of a rich legacy of memories. The other is present day consent, the desire to live together, the will to perpetuate the value of the heritage that one has received. And I'll tell you this, that I know many people have their reservations when it comes to Western education, but a couple semesters ago, I want to say maybe within the last 2 years, I went back to finish up on some things, and I had a history class to where it one of the assignments was actually asking, and it was in the textbook. It was speaking about different lies that they told in the early formulation of United States history. One of them was, the story of Paul Revere, some of the female soldiers, and what they were recorded of having done. And it was admitted, right, by European scholars. And the question that was posed was why, right? That was on one of the on the exam, on the final exam. And from my point of view, it was fairly simple. Like you would say that to give people a legacy so that it could be perpetuated. When we draw back every year, most of us, right? I know some people don't, but most of us celebrate the Feast of Dedication. That was a memorial to be the holy days. It's a memorial so that people can remember a rich legacy and be compelled to continue it going. That's what holidays are. So when you have certain accounts, especially amongst the people like America, that was a melting pot and it was different ethnicities. You needed events, traumatic events, to bind the people together so they could recall these to account. So, in on the particular exam, I think I got like 110 on the exam because the professor was somewhat surprised, because you hear a lot of things where people are quick to maybe look at it in the superficial way that, they're liars, they're this, they're that. But you got to imagine, man, to bring together people of different ethnicities, make them all buy into one idea. That isn't an easy thing to do. So you need understanding of political science, right? Propaganda. And that's why you would do it. And it's worked, So here we see that's one of the the making up of a people is of two principles, right? One is in the possession in common of a rich legacy of memories, and the other is present day consent, the desire to live together, and the will to perpetuate the value. So you get your military enlistment, people pledge allegiance and have a strong desire and even willing to die for that land. So, all right. So we're reading on about judgment, right? Judgment in the spirit, a good leader, right? We read about David. We spoke about David and how he was able to, even when it seemed to be for him, be a righteous judge and still carry out the appropriate judgment that would be necessary for the people to succeed, even on face value when it looked like he was done a favor, right? It didn't stand, right? And so, and this is on Philo, on Joseph, paragraph 79, right? And it reads, but the people, when it is the master, cannot endure a statesman, right? A statesman is a leader or a governor, a king, of so masculine a spirit, and one who keeps so completely aloof from the passions, from pleasure, from fear, from grief, from desire, but it arrests its well wisher and friend and punishes him as an enemy, right? So, saying a good leader, right, or good leaders, a good government is established when the principle, right, the code, the law trumps everything. And each man individually is not willing to waver on those judgments, even if it's friendship, even if it's flattering words, right? A judge must be willing to punish a well wisher and friend and punishes him as an enemy. Consider David, right? Abner, Joab. Before David's death, right? Joab was David's right hand man. Whatever David said, Joab carried out. Joab killed Abner, who was Saul's right hand man. One of David's last things before he died was telling Solomon, bring it to Joab. Get because of what he did. Because of what he did. Because David was a man, and when the scriptures say a man after the Most High's own heart, literally, he was governed. He was governed as a leader only for the collective of the people, outside of the mistakes, right? But we dealing in the perfection of a ruler, right? Things that where you would look at it and at first, it would be a little confusing. Is this not for your benefit, David? These things are helping you, right? What he only cared, it was the code that was important, right? So it's saying, in doing which it first of all inflicts upon itself the most grievous of all punishments, namely ignorance, in consequence of which state it does not itself learn that lesson which is the most beautiful and profitable of all, namely obedience to its governor, from which the knowledge how to govern subsequently springs. So that's speaking to the people not being able to endure proper leadership. It inflicts upon itself the most grievous of all punishments, namely ignorance, right? Not understanding, not considering the position appropriately, right? But here we see, right, these are the necessary traits that must be implanted in a man in establishing that government, that code, that constitution. A man must take and operate according to this oath. If, therefore, it shall be necessary for me to act as a judge, I will decide, neither adhering to any rich man for the sake of his riches, nor gratifying a poor man by reason of my compassion for his misfortunes, right? Being aloof from passions, right? Meaning not swayed. You have to just be subject to the correct judgment, but putting out of sight the rank and outward circumstances of those respecting whom I am to judge, I will honestly pronounce in favor of what shall appear to me to be just. And if I am called to counsel, I will bring forward such opinions as shall appear to me to be for the common advantage, not my own advantage, the common advantage, even though they may not be palatable, even though they might not be easy to digest. And if I am a member of the assembly, right, the Orthodox assembly, men going God's way, right? If I'm a member of the assembly, leaving flattering speeches to others, I will adopt only such as advantageous and salutary, reproving, admonishing, correcting, and studying, not a frantic and insane license of speech, but a sober freedom. Okay. So now that's putting us in that mind. So now having said all of that, we look at communities, we look at land, we look at homesteads. However we plan to do it, this is the first thing it has to be built upon. Guys, it's easy to go to. We can't be so easily moved as descendants of, of those of the diaspora, right? Speaking to those of us of the awakening, the scattered children of Israel, believers in the Messiah, right? When a country says, "Hey, we want you to come back," understand, in most African countries, we can go to the middle of nowhere and a chief will give you land, right? Western Africa, Ghana, them inviting you back. Yeah, and what else do they say? You have to have this certain amount of money to get citizenship because it's profitable. Tourism pays dollars. If you engage in commerce, you have to pay taxes. They benefit from it. So we can't be so easily moved, because if you go in the middle of nowhere in these countries, we haven't built anything here, right? We haven't set up construction with all of the things that you can do here with business loans, the construction equipment that's everywhere. A lot of land that's already developed for purchase. This is undeveloped land. It's money to get construction equipment out there. And yeah, of course, if I own 1,000 acres, right, and somebody's willing to come develop it and I'm going to get taxes on it, of course, yeah, of course, yes, you can come, please. So we really have to think with the level of discernment. We have people in Africa that actually deal with investments, and they advise people in other countries on how to invest in Africa with a firm, right? So we have people with them been going God's way, feet on the ground, and an understanding of how to do it. Who is saying many of the chiefs there are even engaging in corruption now. So it isn't an easy thing, and that's the last thing, right? Getting land, that'll be there. That'll be there. But the thing is, when we get it, knowing what to do with it, knowing how to make the land thrive, knowing how to be governed and how to govern as a people and live harmoniously amongst one another, right? So next, we're going to deal with education, right? Education, because for many of us, right, you hear different things. Hey, I don't need school, right? All your kids need to learn how to do is read and write, and the chicken comes home to roost. Because many, the truth for the last 10, 15 years has gotten really big, and a lot of children were raised with those ideas. And we will see, right? We will see here fairly soon, depending on what ideology you've embraced, how that's going to work out. And it's not so much biblical. I do understand some people's reservations when it comes to education, because you will be subject to certain things as far as certain narratives of history, certain suppression of archaeology. But the solution isn't to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's to get the knowledge, learn the processes, and you do it the right way. I'm not speaking about business management degrees. I'm not speaking about hospitality degrees, liberal arts degrees, social science. I'm speaking about STEM, being able to become a producer. Okay. Being able to become a producer, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, the creation of a grid. That's how we'll have the necessary information to be able to convert resources and be independent discreetly, because that can be dangerous as well, right? So I'm going to read this first, right? This is on education, the preliminary studies, how our ancestors and the forefathers viewed it, right? For grammar, by teaching you the histories which are to be found in the works of poets and historians, will give you intelligence and abundant learning, and moreover will teach you to look with contempt on all the vain fables which erroneous opinions invent, on account of the ill success which history tells us that the heroes and demigods who are celebrated amongst these writers meet with. And music will teach you what is harmonious in the way of rhythm and what is ill arranged in harmony, and rejecting all that is out of tune and all that is inconsistent with melody will guide what was previously discordant to concord, and geometry, sowing the seeds of equality and just proportion in the soul, which is fond of learning, will by means of the beauty of continued contemplation implant in you an admiration of justice. So this is showing us how preliminary studies actually prepare you for a spiritual understanding, believe it or not, right? Geometry. And there was one thing, I'm not a big fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson, but there was one thing that he said that made me think a little bit, right? Because people do say, I don't need school. None of that stuff in school that I learned do I benefit from. Well, we're also subject. So, I mean, it wouldn't if you are a subject, but the actual creators of the things, if you pay an energy bill, if you're charged interest on different things like, vehicles and different things that people create, yes, while you might not have needed it, you also are subject and punished because of your inability to create it. So it's similar, when a woman says, I don't need a man, right? But she has 3 sons in prison. It's like, yeah, we're subject. So of course we don't need it. But to operate independently, to go and gain the knowledge in these specific fields, STEM, right? That's what I'm speaking about. I'm not speaking about, the cousin that has a liberal arts degree, and I'm not speaking, not that those people don't sometimes do good things, right? But I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about the creation of a grid, right? All right. So Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, okay? And yeah, so I'm going to go into a couple of the some scriptures right now, right? Right? So cuz we're touching on education. We're touching on education because our children, many of us, right, like myself, I have a trade, right? And then eventually you become skilled in the trade to be able to become self-employed. And we don't always have time. Now, I didn't know the importance of education when I was young. So I didn't know, man, I should have got into engineering or maybe even tried to become a general contractor, or I didn't know those things early on, but I am going back periodically here and there to get the degree that I need, and not because there's a need financially, because I've learned my trade to where I am self-employed, but as a service and a skill I know that our people will need in the creation of a grid, right? So now I'm going to read Wisdom of Solomon, right? Chapter 7, verse 17, right? Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, verse 17, right? First, I'll read Acts 7 and 22, right? I'll read Acts chapter 7, verse 22, the book of Acts. And it reads, and Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and in deeds, right? We're gonna read about that more, okay? So now let us consider King Solomon. This is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, verse 17. For he hath given me certain knowledge of the things that are, namely, to know how the world was made and the operation of the elements, the beginning, ending, and the midst of the times, the alterations of the turning of the sun and the change of seasons, the circuits of years and the positions of stars, the natures of living creatures and the furies of wild beasts, the violence of winds and the reasonings of men, the diversities of plants and the virtues of roots. So we look here and we see a genius who mastered astronomy, sciences, philosophy, psychology, weather, cartography, medicine, zoology, and even more, depending on how you decode that, right? So I highlight that portion of education due to the opinions I've heard expressed through the years, right? And I'm not saying this as a guy watching from the sideline. Respectfully, I've done things with the children of the diaspora. I've done things. I've helped, right? And I don't say that to glory in it, but I'm saying I've been amongst it. I've seen it. I've seen in the beginning, right, when people said all they need to learn how to do is read and write. And I've seen it years later when I was teaching people how to do public speaking, right? How to read, dealing with the language, right? The Hebrew language, the reasoning. And I've seen it and I said, wow. And right. And some, years ago, and I love this brother, still a brother told me I'm smarter than 90% of the world, right? With what I know in this Bible. And I was like, man, I said, I just wonder. I say, man, well, how'd you come up with that? And the Ak was like, hey, well, think about it, and he broke it down, and it's like, and we punching clocks. We're subject to some crazy things to be operating in that level of arrogance. And I said, wow, this thing has really become rooted heavily in theory, but not really taking the goggles off to look at the world moving around us, all the things we have to buy, all of the things we don't know. We're charged interest on things, right? That if you create, you would be able to use. We upcharged on things to where you go out into the country, some of these people can build mansions for $40,000-$50,000. We paying $250,000 for the same thing, right? So I also add, right, that discourse is good, as well as debate, right, amongst members of an organization who want the best for it, right? But I would be remiss to not speak up as an advocate of our children embracing and excelling in the Western school system while we still can, and operating in the role of a spy, obtaining information and bringing it back to those whom they serve. I don't think education can be oversimplified by suggesting our children only need to know how to read and write because of a supposed short time span left where the world powers would be in power. Be that as it may, science, arithmetic, and knowledge itself is a form of communication with the Most High, because as we understand his elements and creation, we can lawfully figure out how he meant for it to serve us. So we must promote architecture, right? Textile industries. We have people within our community. We have to charge $30 for a t-shirt that takes 5 cents to make, but we don't know the conversion of the plant into the warehouse to make it into a shirt, to fit it, to use the polyester, the silk at the inception of it, right? We don't know. So we are victim to these things. So we cannot scoff at them. We must know, right? Mathematics, technology, so we can be independent as a people, right? So I'm going to read one more thing. I have some things, but I want to bring people on. I want to get feedback, so I won't touch it all, but I just want to look at Acts 7 and 22, right? Acts 7 and 22, where it says what Moses was learned in, okay? Because that's not a light thing, right? One moment. I'm gonna get it on the laptop because I'm all right. One moment. Okay. Let me see here, because I want to elaborate on the Acts 7 and 22, where it speaks about the things that Moses knew. Okay. Okay. I found it here. All right. Okay. All right. So this is on the life of Moses, right? Right. Okay. This is Philo. You guys know I reference Philo a lot because he elaborated on a lot of things we didn't have the information on, and it's easy to be understood by a Western mind. So this isn't a Bible, right? This is, you can read it, you can throw out what you don't like, but it's helped me understand things a great deal. So that's why I go in different books. I share a lot of books, and you read it for yourself, right, and see what you think. But this is on the life of Moses, right? Accordingly, he speedily learnt arithmetic and geometry, and the whole science of rhythm and harmony and meter, and the whole of music by means of the use of musical instruments, and by lectures on the different arts, and by explanations of each topic. And lessons on these subjects were given him by Egyptian philosophers, who also taught him the philosophy which is contained in symbols, which they exhibit in those sacred characters of hieroglyphics, as they are called, and also that philosophy which is conversant about that respect which they pay to animals, which they invest with the honors due to God. And all the other branches of the encyclical education he learned from Greeks. And the philosophers from the adjacent countries taught him Assyrian literature and the knowledge of the heavenly body, so much studied by the Chaldeans. And this knowledge he also derived. And this knowledge he derived also from the Egyptians, who study mathematics above all things. And he learned with great accuracy the state of that art among both the Chaldeans and Egyptians, making himself acquainted with the points in which they agree with and differ from each other. So he would cross-examine it, cross-textualize it, right? Different narratives of history, right? And determine what would be the most accurate, making himself master of all their disputes without encouraging any disputatious disposition in himself, meaning he was not a contrarian. He searched for it with a even eye, a just like a judge. It wasn't so much to find fault in things, but rather just hear it out and only disagree with that which was obviously wrong, right? But seeking the plain truth, since his mind was unable to admit any falsehood, as those who are accustomed to do, who contend violently for one particular side of a question, and who advocate any doctrine which is set before them, whatever it may be, not inquiring whether it deserves to be supported, but acting in the same manner as those lawyers who defend the cause for pay and are wholly indifferent to the justice of their cause. So that brings us to the point we made earlier, right? And we see that's being reprimanded, that would be crazy to us, where when you look at the different procedures, how our law used to be, you would have just judges who sat in, maybe 3, maybe 5, and it would be a matter of a vote. And then they would just vote on what they all individually seem to be true. But when you have prosecutors, you have judges who fund the system, those things are wrong, right? So I'm not here to say that, America is blameless, but you really have to compare what we see in the West and compare that to our institutions. Like, we had the NAACP, if you want to be more broad, to see how willing we were to engage in corruption. And then amongst those of the awakening, many people are familiar with certain situations where everything wasn't on the up and up. So Moses, as a judge, putting out everything that he would want to be true, and only dealt with just judgment. So these things are important as fundamental principles in developing first a community, right? Families being able to live together, and whatever the Most High decides he wants to reward us with on this plane. So with that, let me sit here. I'm gonna get back on the stream yard. If Aki Elijah is in, I want to bring the brothers in. I think I shared a link with a couple of brothers. Akamah, Shalom. Hey, Shalom. Student Thomas, Tan Jamaican Leak, Shalom. Zedekiah, Shalom. Ma'at, yes, Shalom, Shalom. Brother James Bailey, Yes. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Okay. All right. Um. All right. So again, I am gonna be sharing the link today. So for people to come in and talk, but you'll come in through the StreamYard through the video. So just had a presentation appropriate, please. And yeah. All right. So let me reach out, see if those brothers are ready to come on. Right. All right. I'm on. Yeah. So that's what we touching on. Really the independence. Okay, let me see. I got my arc here. All right. Hey, Shalom. How you doing? Hey,
Check,
Shalom,
check.
Shalom. Yep, you coming through
Shalom,
clear.
Mark.
Hey, Shalom, bro. How you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, Locke. I'm doing well. Have you been able to tune? You've been tuned into the lesson what we've been touching on today?
Yes, sir. Yes, I have.
Good.
Very needed topic.
Mm,
Very needed topic.
I'm on. I'm on. Yes, sir. So what say you when you look at what it takes for our people of the diaspora to start looking to be independent? Or first, let me ask you: are you familiar with what's going on with Africa looking to expel the French from their borders?
Yes, I believe that's Niger, right?
Oh, you said oh, okay, yes, Niger, yes, sir,
Niger,
yes, sir.
Niger. Yes.
Okay, yes, sir. Yeah. So and it just made me think of what it is needed for people to be able to operate independently, and more specifically, us, you and I, here in the West, the descendants of slaves, not having much skills, because in the time when we did, we read records of our architects, our master builders, not even being able to be employed, to where they were forced into servile menial jobs, ultimately losing the skills, not able to pass it down. How do we look to build in a practical sense, separate and independent?
Well, first things first. I think you hit the nail right on the head. It
Mm,
starts with education,
mm,
right? Like the scriptures tell us, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge.
mm,
Right.
mhm,
So the knowledge is key, and like you said, I think education has really been downplayed,
mhm,
unfortunately,
mhm,
in the Israelite community amongst the Hebrews.
mm,
But as you were speaking, something came to mind.
mm,
There was a movie that came about from a novel,
mm,
and came out. The novel came out 1969, I believe. The movie dropped in 1973,
mm,
and it's entitled "The Spook Who Sat by the Door."
okay.
Right, and in the movie there was a brother who was employed by the CIA. Right,
Mm,
he was the one token Negro, so to speak,
mhm,
who they needed to basically make themselves look like they were integrating, minorities.
mm,
So while during his time in the CIA, he was learning about their tactics, he was learning about their ways, right? Just
mm,
quietly. And through him sitting back and observing, he saw how they were using these tactics to have leverage over his people and to oppress his people,
mm,
right? And that was enough to spark something in him, right?
mm,
The scriptures also say, surely oppression maketh a wise man mad. So
mhm,
when he saw the oppression, he's like, you know what, forget this. He dropped out, and then he began to go into the inner cities, right, to
mm,
the disenfranchised youths, and he began to teach them what he had learned by the CIA during his time, his stint with
mm,
them. And then they were labeled as freedom fighters, but he
mm,
was able to take what was being used against his own people, right? And he began to employ it amongst his own for their liberation,
Mm.
right? And we have to have that same attitude when it comes to um, what's being done right here in the West,
Wow.
right? Like you said, okay, we know that we must have our own land. You know, we must
Mm-hmm.
be independent of
Mm-hmm.
the system, right?
Right. Right.
But okay, we have the land, we have the resources,
Mm.
but do we have the knowledge to know what to do with it?
Right.
Right? The knowledge is key.
Mm.
So, absolutely, absolutely.
Man. Wow. Yeah. That reminded me. That reminded me of a scripture here. I wanna bring because
Mhm.
and I guess so with the spook who sat by the door. So is it that's him basically saying he sat by the door and he's seen inside?
Yes,
Mm,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. So in First Samuel 13 and 19, it
Hmm.
says, "Now there was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears." So they took the ability, right? And that's on one front. We can't now engage in war. We would never be able to rise, but that's many different things. War being one of them, because I mean, I couldn't even begin to think about how they create those things. You know what I mean? And the
Right.
nuclear sciences. But all the time, not too long ago, I was getting a tire change, and
Mhm.
there was a brother there. He was from Iran, and we got into small talk, and he was like, "Yeah, I go to UMKC because it was really cold. I'm in the Midwest," and he was saying how he wasn't used to it, so he was here getting an education. I said, "What are you going to school for?" He said, "Chemical engineering." I said, "Okay." So after school, he was about to graduate. I'm like, "Are you gonna move somewhere?" He's like, "Nah, I'm going back home." So they come, Iran. I mean, we know what the scriptures say about that. And they come, they still say, "Okay, we have to go get the knowledge, but we'll utilize it." I watched the documentary on Saudi Arabia, and I want to say the power they have today, it might have happened within the last 150 years. They were
Mhm.
nomads not long ago. But when the West first came, they negotiated with them, and maybe a few dealings they took advantage of them, but then they learned quickly, okay, now you have to teach us military practice,
Mhm.
you or we won't give it to you. Then they started learning the value. You have to teach us the economy. So and if you watch the documentary, you would see some of the leaders at that
Mhm.
time. They were so, it happened, their riches happened so fast to where they would set up tents and go stay in the desert. And these was billionaires, but they were that far, not they were just not used to living in palaces, living. So you got a billionaire somewhere just in a tent, because that's how comfortable they were, because that's how quick they were able to rise. So these are the examples we have to put ourselves in the mind of, to rise out of the situation. And the kingdom does not come by observation. I do
Right.
believe in the Most High giving, pouring the Spirit out, giving us the mind to be able to rise, but it can't be something as simple as just reading the Bible and thinking that's going to, that is a motivation to say, "Oh, this is what they did." When we read about Bezalel and the skills that he had, Nehemiah, who was a governor in a
Mhm.
foreign kingdom, and then used his position, his understanding, to then restore his people. And that's what we see with the movie, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. So I'm gonna go back and watch that.
Mhm.
And if you want to speak a little bit more to the topic, that's fine. I'm going to have people come on or get them the opportunity to, just to see what the people are thinking as well, and try that today also.
Yes. I just want to throw in as well that, understanding, wisdom, knowledge, and education, those things can preserve you,
Mm,
even in the midst of being among an unrighteous people, even in the midst of oppression.
mm,
And the example that I like to touch on regarding that is Daniel,
Mm,
right? Remember Daniel and Mishael, Hananiah, and Azariah, or better
mm,
known as Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego,
mm,
right? When Nebuchadnezzar came into Judah, and he was taking everybody back unto Babylon. Part of the reason why Daniel and the rest of the young men were preserved was due to their education, due to the
mm,
knowledge that they possessed.
mm,
And if I may just
mm.
read that part real quick,
Please.
the book of Daniel, chapter 1 and verse, I'll start at verse 1.
Okay.
It says, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiada, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom
Mm,
and cunning in knowledge and
mm,
understanding science, and
mm,
such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and who they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Right.
wow.
So we have to really embrace the skills. We have to embrace the knowledge. We have to embrace whatever it is that we learned in the system, and we must encourage our children to go into these schools as spooks who sat by the door, so to speak.
Mm,
Right,
man.
right. Get this understanding, get this knowledge, right? Study it as best as you can, retain this information, and come back and
Mm,
help your people. We have to train them up with the mindset of, look, I'm doing this for my people. That is the end goal,
mm,
right? Um, we see certain movies or television shows where this same thing is happening, right? There's a young boy, and
mm,
he's next to inherit the throne or whatever, and he's being taught, he's being brought under the tutelage of
mm,
teachers,
mm,
right? So to where when he becomes of age, he's able to employ everything that he has learned for the greater good of the kingdom,
man.
right? So our children must have that same attitude. But
Man.
of course, they need a foundation
Mm,
of right and wrong, of
mhm,
good and evil, to know,
mhm,
like, hey, when they begin talking about all of this things that are against the most high, the alphabet community, whatever
mhm,
it may be, you don't
mhm,
have to get into an argument or debate or strife, as
mm,
long as they're not trying to, push it on you individually,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
But just know that that's wrong. But just know that you're there to learn, these particular things and bring
mm,
it back. That's and I'll wrap it up with this.
mhm,
A lot of our ancestors, of course, we know that it was strictly forbidden for them to read, right?
mm. Yes,
Could
sir.
not read a lot of times. If they were
Mhm,
caught reading, they got their tongues cut out. That was
mm,
punishable by death. They were hung, burned at the stake. All types of
mm,
um, horrendous things were done to our ancestors.
mm,
But um, the children, they were the ones who more so knew how to read,
mm,
because the slave owners didn't see them as a threat. They
mm,
felt like they were just, parrots
mm.
who were just repeating something that they didn't quite understand. And there
Man.
was a show called what was it called? I think it was the Book of Negroes, right? And it was
Mm,
a little boy, and the slave owners or masters, if you will, they had this young Hebrew boy, maybe about age 7, couldn't have been
mhm,
no more than 7,
mm,
and they gathered him. They called him forth, and he was on the porch, and they were entertaining some guests. And
mhm,
the form of them entertaining their guests was having the young Hebrew brother read, right?
Mm, mm-hmm,
Read. And they were like, wow, that's impressive, right?
mm-hmm,
And they said that very same thing that I just said. Oh, he doesn't understand what he's reading, because one of them
mm,
had said, oh, that's very dangerous. Nat Turner knew how to read. And they said, well,
mm,
the boy doesn't know what he's saying. He's just like a parakeet. He's only, saying the words, but has no understanding of them. And they had him
mm,
reading from the Bible. So guess
mm,
what? Cut to the next scene. They brought the young Hebrew brother. He was in the shack, right?
mm,
And
mhm,
all the adult brothers and sisters were gathered around him, right?
mm,
And he was reading them what the word had said. He
mm,
was teaching them how to read,
mm,
right? So that just goes to show there might be certain things that we never learned in while during our time in school.
right.
There might be new technologies and sciences that are coming out that we did not have access to or weren't privy to. But now
Mm-hmm,
AI is becoming something that's widespread, coding,
mm,
IT, all of these
mm,
things. And so these things our children can pick up and teach us, their parents, these things on how to benefit the whole good, the entire nation.
man, man, I'm on. Indeed, bro. It's important. It's important, and we cannot waste. We cannot waste our children away. You have Khan Academy. The last 2 years I found out about that,
Mm,
man. And even to the brothers that I know, sometimes we might find ourselves in situations of children from prior relationships to where we might not have the influence we would like,
mm,
even if you have to financially incentivize those children because they don't have to listen to you. We have to do everything we can to point them in the right direction
mhm,
to develop independence. Like you mentioned, coding.
mhm,
There's the even different things us as adults can go back on self-paced, so we can try and learn some skills that will be tangible that we can utilize for the independence of our people. But that's how we have to think,
mhm.
right? So shalom to everyone in the chat. I'm going to share the link for people to come in to for a little and comment on what you think, what you would like to see, what the direction you think we should go in, and what steps we can take to become independent as a people, right? So I'm gonna share this StreamYard link. It is video. I know last week a brother asked to be able to do that, so I wanted to make sure we could today. Yeah, the spook who sat by the door. That's something I'm gonna definitely look into.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, I just shared the link. Yeah, because when I seen it, man, within 10 years, Uganda, they just put people in positions over warehouses. Um, and it shot down. And I do believe there was some economic warfare waged on them,
Mm,
to where people wouldn't trade with them. But even then, I mean that's all the more reason to try and learn how to operate independently, so you don't need anyone else. A lot of Deuteronomy 28 deals with economic independence and having to go to other people for certain things that we always would have known how to feed ourselves, and to where we have so much that where people would come to us to borrow. People would come to us in times of famine, in times of need. People would seek us as an ally in times of war because of the information that we had. But the tables have turned, and now we're attempting to be restored.
mhm.
So I shared the
Absolutely.
link. If anybody would like to come in and comment on the topic, I see Akamad, Shalom, Shalom. Um, I shared the link. So come in, give us, if you have any questions, comments, click the link.
Shalom, Akamar.
Yes, sir. Yeah, bro, it's a needed topic. Just want to chop away at every block as we establishing men going God's way. And right now, at the inception of it, but we got to be put in the proper state of mind. We've seen it, and I do sympathize because I do look at a lot of the things that maybe haven't been perfect, um, within our community. And I look at it, some of it you would be a victim of being first, like,
Mm,
because we viewed it like, okay, is it more of a spiritual thing and everything being divine? Is it more of an individual thing where it's one guy and he's just like, look, follow me, because that's how the scriptures were interpreted at the time. But as we learn more, we can do better. And I think this system that's being developed, with them men going God's way, a constitution, orthodoxy, and uh, something developed by the people, for the people, right?
mhm.
Protected by a board of men. I think that will be valuable in terms of government, as well as having a direction, as far as families being on one accord, being independent, autonomous, raising up children to do things to advance the work and advance the mission. I think this will be beneficial for us.
Right, absolutely. And we can't have this mindset of lack and limitation in terms of, um, shunning certain curriculum that is out
Mm,
there, right? You know, too often we hear in sectors of the Christian church that, hey, the stars, that's evil and this
mm,
is evil. And, a lot of our people write off things as being evil or demonic or dark and all of that. You know what
mhm,
I'm saying? And, if these things, uh, like we know what things are explicitly
mhm,
forbidden according to the scriptures, necromancy and divining of divination,
mhm, mhm,
dealing with familiar spirits, things of that nature. But
mhm,
for an example, I just gave an example. A lot of our people, like I said, primarily I hear it from sectors of the Christian church where they're like, looking up at the stars, that's wicked or
mm,
that's evil. Well, how do you think our ancestors were able to navigate from one place to another?
mm,
How do you think our ancestors were able to tell time?
mm,
Able to know when the harvest was, when the
man.
beginning of the year was, when it ended. You know
Mm,
what I'm saying? So
right.
all these things were lost. We can't have an attitude of staying away from certain things because of a religious mindset,
Mhm,
right?
right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
absolutely, bro. Religious mindset. I was researching something, and I was still looking into it, but what I found was that even the I like extremely religious mindsets, and when we look at the process where we'll be going through each law, codifying it, basing it on a voting system, right? In the early church, because you might hear things about like heresy, and every little thing must be an agreement, and there's a very meticulous process on how you should challenge it, if you're allowed to, if you're able to. And I was reading that what constituted heresy, it was like only two things, and it dealt with, though I don't believe in a virgin birth or the Trinity, right? I believe those things to be rooted heavily in Zoroastrianism, and those interpretations being a Western thing. But nevertheless, heresy was like major things, and it was like a few things that maybe the organization was built on, similar to how we've all agreed to the Torah, right? The gospel. But as far as, you know, various things, you would have a vote, right? You would have a vote, but I might not agree, but I will submit to the vote, right? I would submit to the vote. And that has even been taken in a thing where it's extremely religious, or it's almost feared, to raise up certain things that would honestly, it with the right type of people, right? With the right type of people. And I believe, okay, my screen went black. With the right type of people, and I believe the metrics with them men going God's way, and just those things create an environment of reasonable people and not fanatical people. I believe that's good because it raises the level of, you have to be more familiar because you always on your toes, and it's not so much of a thing to where just for no reason at all, but things that are to the edification and the benefit of the people. Hey, I think we should look into this. This is how I'm viewing this thing, not being afraid or overly superstitious about certain things, but inviting those challenges. So and Nakamad just came in, so I'm gonna let Akin, Akin. I just wanted to make that point if you would like to speak to it as well. Hey, shalom, Ak, shalom.
Hey,
Shalom.
salute, Doc.
Yes, sir.
Bless
Yes,
you,
sir.
brothers, man. This right here
Mm.
is timely.
Mm.
Shabbat shalom to the family.
Mm.
Uh,
Shalom.
the diaspora scattered abroad,
Mm.
both near and far.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shalom, Ak. And,
Absolutely.
and and so with the conversation today,
hmm
what have you seen? What do you think? What would you add on when we look to be a people that's independent? There's one thing you said to me early on when we were really making decisions on what we were to do, even if it was men going God's way, whatever that was. And you and I were in deep talks and just conversation. And you mentioned something to me that I remember. You said, you said 30 years, right? We don't know how much time we have left, but in 30 years, a culture can be developed, a
Yes.
great people, and we lay our brick to that. So with the conversation today, what do you say?
You know what? I think what everybody needs to gain from this right now is understand what you were bringing out is what the ancients of old knew.
Mm.
And they knew that this day would come and these conversations would be had. We like to lean to wisdom and understanding. The Most High told us to study and show ourselves approved.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that might turn some heads
Mm.
and even burn some ears.
Mm.
But I'm going to say Confucius said,
Mm.
if you are the smartest one in the room,
Mm.
then you are in the wrong room.
Mm.
That's wisdom, right?
Mm.
It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter who it comes from.
Right.
A lot of the times, people are coerced through fear. And that fear, through that fear, they believe that's a calling.
Mm.
I was so scared that I joined. I was
Mm.
so scared that I adhered to every whisper,
Mm.
to every articulate utterance.
Mm.
When in fact you're operating in fear.
Mm.
You went into the water with fear, so were you able to repent?
Mm.
Because you went to the water because you had fear.
Mm.
Right now, it's not a time for fear.
Mm.
Right now isn't the time to be showing that we can shoot guns. Okay? Right now is the time for men to gather themselves together, for men to actually have these talks. Double honors to the elder for providing this platform so that it can be done. And double honors to you, Moray, for bringing this out, because the people need the education that you have received. I'm going to read something.
Okay.
Brother Elijah,
Yes,
thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
All praises to the Most High.
And salute.
Mm.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
going to read
Salute.
something out of Jeremiah chapter 6, okay? Because this is what you're saying to the people.
Mm.
We're in Jeremiah chapter 6,
Mm.
verse 16. And
Okay.
I'm going to be reading out of the HarperCollins Study Bible. This
Okay.
is the entire Bible, all 66 books. Okay. But it's written so that a Westerner could understand it.
Okay.
And I've examined it thoroughly with the Hebrew.
Okay.
It says, "Thus saith the Lord, stand at the crossroads and look and ask for the ancient paths."
Mm.
Now, you just went into how Moses, right,
Mm.
learned from the Chaldeans and
Mm.
the Egyptians. That is our Moses, who we
Mm.
reverence to this day, till this very day, through
Mm-hmm.
Torah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in double honors, and infinite honors to our Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
okay? Because he brought it out. He
Mm.
brought everything Moses said to fruition
Mm.
and fully fulfilled it.
Yes, sir.
All was fulfilled.
Yes, sir.
But you're saying, look at the ancient and ask for the ancient paths.
Mm.
See, the ancients knew exactly what sciences, what mathematics, what mind state they must have to go and earn their knowledge so that they can, that's what bringing a brick is. Bringing a brick isn't walking around in the spirit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bringing a brick is because you have taken a time, a talent that the Most High gave you to learn,
Mm.
to study,
Mm.
and then you went and got a skill. And there isn't a leader out there who can deny that when he says bring a brick, he's not telling somebody to come there all spiritual. But they embellish in that when people come all spiritual, when really we should be provoking them to get skills.
Mm.
But those are the conversations we should be having
Mm-hmm.
with the men,
Mm-hmm.
with the women. What skill, where's your education?
Mm-hmm.
Here is financing for your education.
Mm. Wow.
Because we see you have the tenacity and the aptitude to learn something like this.
Mm.
We see it in you.
Mm.
So we're going to invest in you.
Wow.
We're going to send you to get educated by the Chaldeans and the Egyptians.
Mm. Mm.
So you can help save your people.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Come on.
Where the good way lies. Where the good way lies, and walk in it.
Mm.
And walk in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about the construction, bringing an apparatus together, moving parts that will work, everybody having an order and being disciplined in their way.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Listen, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this publicly, right?
Mm-hmm.
In all respect to Hebrew Israelites, I'm an Israelite, not a Hebrew Israelite.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Hebrew, no doubt. I'm an Israelite, no doubt. But we're Israelites, period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? There are truths to be learned, truthfully, from the Jewish populace.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
They must be respected. Because a lot of the information that we glean, they've already assessed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's good people amongst the populace.
Mm-hmm.
Just like there's good people amongst us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go and get the education where we need to get the education.
Right.
Okay? We've been baptized and we've received the Holy Spirit.
Mm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So now we know that we walk in the way. And we trust that Spirit to guide us. Waruwak Kadosh,
Mm-hmm.
to be specific.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want anybody to make any mistake and believe that we're out here for a thrill. Now, we're men out here. We're men out here with skills, okay? And we're developing ourselves and we're developing our sons. Because there would be one who would send their child to school and then turn around and tell you that your child don't need to be educated. They're educating their child so that their child can succeed in them. Because for every master, there's an apprentice, right? So their plan is for their child to rule over you, to succeed them.
Indeed.
Yes, we all need to make sure that our children, as fathers, would have an inheritance, and we need to make sure that our grandchildren will have an inheritance. That is my priority. I have many sons, many daughters, and so this life I've never played with. Double honors to all the elders out there, Pastor Dow, Elder Recall, Bishop Nathaniel, okay? This is the work. M.G.G.W, boots on the ground.
Yes, sir.
From here into the four corners of the earth. Get ready.
I'm on. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Let me get back to. Okay. I'm learning. I'm learning, y'all. So I'm
Yes, sir.
I'm messing around with it. But thank you, bro. Thank you. And that's valuable, bro. This is the time, right? Having sons, right? Many of us do. We have to prepare them to be as spies. We of course, on the Sabbath, the time we spend with them, we're imparting teachings into them all the time to guard their minds. It's difficult, especially when you told me this week, you mentioned how I guess, and I didn't, I'm going off of what you said, Dr. Umar, did you say there were some advancements in the school he was making?
That's right. That's
okay.
Right.
And so his plan was to have only Black people, or what he refers to as African people, work on the school. And he found that it was impossible to do that because of the business dealings, because of the procrastination, the unfair financial practices. And he said, man, when he went to the other nations, within a matter of days, the work was done, something that had been slow rolled for months. And so the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, he highlights the frustrations because of the standards the nations are used to dealing at. And that's the hard part, right? When you raise your son to be an engineer, he's at Black and Veatch, Procter and Gamble, making $350,000. And like you said, now he's the spook because he's saying, man, I got to go back, right? I got to give this up. And I could have rolled off into the sunset. I could have got mine. I'm going to give it up. I'm going to start a small firm. I'm going to deal with people that really can't even afford my quality of service because of how I've learned how to do it. I'm going to go to the inner cities and try and implant in them a mind of why education is important. It wouldn't, I remember being young. I remember, and you would see people embracing school, and I just didn't know how it equated to reality. I didn't know. I didn't know why I was learning these things, so I didn't have the motivation. I dreaded it, but now we know to where we have to impart to our children a love of learning, an understanding, having an actual worldview to know what's going on, to be able to view it from up here and not as subjects. That's
exactly
what we have to do.
A geopolitical worldview. Okay. We've been subjected to residing here, and we hear many boast from many Israelites, the Goyim. We hear from them even, right? They boast about their travels, right? And so there's some kind of inferiority, right? To say we've traveled. But I'm gonna tell you one thing for sure. Traveling with wisdom is gained through much traveling. And there's a lot of traveling here in our future. Okay, but we didn't travel without the wisdom of understanding the importance of getting the education we need to get when we go there. Okay, everywhere we go is going to have a purpose. Okay, an educational, geopolitical purpose
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for the salvation of our people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And, we really have to take advantage of
Spoken over.
where we're at right now. I know there's a lot of injustice, there's a lot of oppression. The people who are running everything, they do their best to try and keep their foots on our necks.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I think the goal for many of us are to make our way to Africa, where we see that many nations are trying to have a stake in Africa right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have all the resources in the world
Mm-hmm.
um, there, and they have many different countries going in and extracting the resources and paying them pennies on the dollar for it, and it's all due to a lack of education on their part.
Right.
Our people over there don't have the knowledge on how to extract the resources. They don't have the knowledge on what is the value of it. They don't know how to leverage these things.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're really waiting on us to
Mm.
come over there and be saviors of sorts,
Wow.
because they know that we're over here. So
Mm.
they're probably almost assuming that we
Mm.
have the knowledge, the know-how, and the means, the mental fortitude to be able to go over there and make things happen.
Mm.
So, it's not only just for us, it's for our people who are over in Africa right now being oppressed. If we think we're being oppressed, nah.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
they're being oppressed. We have
Mm.
access to so
Mhm.
many things that, many of our people over there would give their left arm for,
Mm.
right? So we really have to have a spirit of gratitude. And there's a reason why the Most High placed us in this place, in the belly
Mm.
of the beast, so to speak,
Mm.
where we're at right now. So we have to take full advantage of it so that it can all pay off and
Mm.
benefit all of the Most High's children. When we get over there eventually, because
Man,
they're dependent on us.
I'm on.
Indeed.
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 Indeed. And look,
Mhm.
we gonna plan a trip over there, man. Y'all know we have a Ak with his feet on the ground, but Ak is doing some big work, so he really behind the scenes. He's texting me now, but
Mm,
he just sent me he just sent me some videos, but he's private. It's private, but he just sent me videos right now. I'm looking at
mm,
developing land, and he's like, "I keep it under wraps," because Ak is really dealing with. I mean, Ak is dealing on some big levels. The governments that invest there go through him.
mm,
It's
Mhm.
him. It's literally his firm, and so
Mhm.
Doc has to work behind the scenes, and
That's
we
right.
can't bring him on these platforms because he's dealing with people that high up the White House. The
Mhm.
pictures I've
mm,
seen, the pictures I've seen, the seminars, and he's telling them
Con.
because what happens is a lot of these companies, a lot of these people in these countries, we seen the movie, Blood Diamonds. You got kids
mm,
going down in the ground,
Mhm.
and a lot of
Mhm.
these people, they don't want that to be on their reputation, so they want to invest
mm,
in Africa, but they want it to be legit, not in violation of the laws and the UN. So
Mhm.
that's what he does. He literally is the go-to guy to make sure it's legit dealing. So he's developing land, he's given the prices, and so that's how we know it's not difficult to be granted this land, but what's
mm,
difficult is to have the mind to be able to do something with it. We seen when we were on the stream with the brother New Breed and the organization that he's building with. I mean, they were counting off thousands of acres, right? I mean,
Mhm.
thousands. But the
Liberia.
difficult
Mhm.
part is like, you know is building on it and being able to get there, being able to get the equipment there, have the right types of people to be able to do it as well. So these skills we can go back. A lot of brothers, I mean, even if brothers are maybe accrued debt at a time. You make a couple payments on it, you can get fast for grants, and you can really go back with the maturity many of us have gained now, with an aptitude to be able to study, read, comprehend well, and you can go back and really steamroll a lot of these courses because of how, right, us gaining a belief in the Most High has raised our intelligence and our intellect. So we can go back and we can get these skills, and it does take time, because even then, um, becoming an engineer or having license to do it, then you have to go to a process to where you can do that independently. And that's another process on working for one of the big firms and then taking more tests. But even just starting that process. Another big thing is even just understanding taxes to the point to where you don't have to pay them, and helping people do that. Because I'm telling you, for these billionaires to be able to not have to pay taxes, it isn't something we should look at necessarily as unjust. We should look to benefit from it, because in all honesty, if you bring economy to a land, as many of these jobs do, you're going to be incentivized because they get tax dollars. So they have to incentivize the people of industry, the people with the capabilities, to boost the economy. So you would benefit from that. So we don't want to just be stuck on a level of complaining about the people who've shown more understanding of these laws to benefit from them. We got to say, okay, how can we do that?
Exactly. For instance, as you spoke about taxes, taxes are put in place so that they can have inflation at any time, and to continue to monetize themselves silently at any time. So they say we put a tax on everything. Do you know, if you take a body, a loved one, right, and you bury a loved one on your property, you don't have to pay taxes for it, because that property is now considered a cemetery.
Wow.
Okay. And so cemeteries became popular so that people wouldn't bury their loved ones on their property, and they could be taxed. This was after the First World War.
Man. Wow.
See, it's the little games they play.
Yes.
Man.
So we're going broke to bury a loved one. We're cremating a loved one, breaking the laws of the Most High. If we had generational wealth, right? I mean, who knows what could be left for someone? Some people may. You see, my father has many acres, you know, many resources, right? So I understand what it could be to acquire something from your father. I have something personally to look forward to myself, in addition to what I already have myself. Okay. But I'm just saying that to say that if we were to bury a loved one on our land, we're then living debt free. But that's not spoken of. And that's why I said it's the little games they play. And this is what our people need to know. That's why it was so urgent for them to have us sell our land so that they could acquire it. Because then we lose all knowledge of how to govern even a small, personal property. Most people haven't even owned a home. I mean, debt-free, where you growing on it, you're doing what you want, you don't have no housing authority. Most people haven't even done that so that they can understand the laws. But these laws this is how you actually gain equity, to understand these laws.
Man.
Yes.
Indeed.
And if I may, just very briefly, you know, speaking of laws, Akamad, you know, it would behoove every brother and sister to get familiarized with American law. or with U.S. law, right? Here I have a Black's Law Dictionary. And even when you go to very simple words like person, right? When you examine these things, we use words every day, but we don't truly have an understanding or understanding of what the words mean. You know, just like in the Willie Lynch letter, you know, for anybody who is not familiar with the Willie Lynch letter, it's a letter that allegedly was written by a man named William Lynch on a four-part uh, foolproof system on how to get the American slave owners to have full control over their slaves for generations to come. Right. So in there,
Yes, sir.
one of the methods that he discussed was, you know, you allow him to be able to communicate with you, so to where he understands you, but he said you do it in a way to where he does not fully understand the words. For example, this is the example that he used. He said, when you say unto the slave, um, hey, go get our crops, he knows what crops you're talking about, right? But he does not understand that when the slave master or owner is saying our crops, he's not saying our crops in terms of the slave having any stake in those crops, right? So taking it back to the law dictionary, the term persons actually refers to a corporation, right? It's a legal fiction.
God.
It's a legal identity, right? And we use it. We think that the term is used to refer to a human or mankind. But when you go into their court systems, right, because that's exactly what it is, a system, and you pass those swinging doors, which is called the floodgate, or which is called the bar, you're no longer under the law of the land. You are now under maritime law. So metaphorically, it's like you're on water, right? And they have implemented these laws to where you are not able to navigate a ship on water except you have a marine license. So that's where lawyers and attorneys come into play. So when you go into their courtrooms and you're passing these floodgates or you're passing the bar and you answer to the name that is on the birth certificate, they're no longer dealing with you as a natural person or a flesh and blood living being. No, they're dealing with you as a corporation, right? As an entity. And you're being sued. You're being brought in there and there's some debt that needs to be handled, right? Even simple things like that, right? Of course, it's a
Yes,
very
sir.
wicked and nefarious system, but we have to educate ourselves on these things so that we know how to overcome it, how to beat them at their own game.
Indeed.
And I'll yield with that.
Yes, sir.
Well said, Out. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Indeed. Indeed.
And I am
Absolutely.
familiar. Yes, sir.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So again, you know, we want to promote the raising of our people, and the Bible is the starting point, right? It's the starting point, but we have to show our faith through demonstration, right? The kingdom does not come by observation, right? So this will probably be something we continue next week, maybe even going more so into the judgment, right? The government in positions of, you know, authority and leadership, the integrity we must operate with in a from a place of service. I really wanted to touch on the education today because that's such a big conversation, and I couldn't do it without first touching on how that's going to be established. I think men going God's way and the principles that this is established on is a great foundation, bringing brothers independent minded, setting a standard, right? Setting a standard amongst those men. And we begin to build, we begin to grow, we begin to struggle, study, learn with each other, and develop, right? And then we develop that system, and it spreads. Brothers are empowered, protected by the code, and the code is also enforced. That's what a law is. And so education, that's going to give us the know-how to where we can go back to these regions. Like when we read about weeks ago, I believe that's what the apostle Thomas was able to do, going into India and maybe building wells, and he ended up dying there due to the leaders there seeing the influence he was able to get. But he went there and he built wells. He brought a service. We speak about going there and being able to bring sanitation, effective methods for just sanitation, and we have to learn these things here, and then be able to take them back and establishing independence. But we don't want to do it too abruptly, because we see that can also end destructively as well. We've seen it in 1972. I pray and I hope that they have a good method to do that, to expel the French from their land, if that's how they decide to proceed. But it can be tough. I've already heard of factions rising, because now there will be independent factions looking to come into power. We seen that in the Josephus around 70 AD, because people are saying, look, well, if we're going to be independent, who comes into power? So people, now you're going to have militias, different political parties. We even seen Southern Sudan, where when they were made a separate country, there were many mass killings because people were looking to now take the power. I believe once the Northern Sudanese, the Arabs, were expelled, and then even then the external countries scorched the earth so that it wouldn't yield land. So it's a dry desert, it's barren. These are the things you have to think about when becoming independent, because even if you are able to sustain, you have to be able to protect your borders. So we got to get in the mind of leaders, emperors, rulers, and really begin preparing to rise. And it's going to start with having real tangible ability, so we can create a grid and survive off grid. Solar energy, knowing how to produce energy, being able to manufacture and create all the goods that we need, knowing how to support and establish an economy of trading, bartering, even a honorable taxing system, so that the government and the people and your scholars and your priests can thrive, and it's all balanced. We had the scriptures as a good blueprint, but this is the mind we have to be in. So I close on that. Brothers, do you have any last words before we get off?
Just a short last word up.
Mm-hmm.
You have brought a level of insight, and I've watched you grow and develop to this point. And you're not speaking ignorantly, because there are people, right, that have followers, and they would have them believe that all you have to do at this point is read your Bible, listen to them, and wait for the kingdom to come.
Wow.
Prepare for a feast day. Sow something, cook something, read something,
Wow.
bring something. When in all actuality, they're reinforcing themselves. But what Moray R1 is bringing to you all today is that, number one, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And it doesn't come through by observation. And we've heard that every man must bring a brick, and we know we'll be judged by not using our talents. We know we are to study and show ourselves approved. That's not just the Bible. You would have some believe that they are the smartest people in the world just because they know some passages from the Bible. No. must live up to what you've attained. That's true.
Yes, sir.
But there is much more for you to gain.
Mm-hmm.
Here, men are working.
Mm-hmm.
Here, men, Ahmad, are taking a stand
Mm.
from all of this effeminate moving around. Okay?
Yeah.
All this effeminate moving around, and the only reason they may feel masculine is because they could toke a pistol.
Mm.
Okay? Or because they can walk with their chest up.
Mm.
I've looked in the eyes of many men, and I know mighty men when I see them.
Mm.
And you can look at me, and you know this is a mighty man.
God. Indeed. 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 Yes, sir.
That's all I have to say.
Yes, sir. Elijah. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. You know, all praises to the Most High. And I really appreciate you brothers coming on and really edifying and helping bring forth these things. It's good to hear from various point of view so we can build this thing together. You know, men empowered, men standing and bringing a brick and doing a work.
Yes,
You
sir.
know, that's the goal. So Elijah, I'm gonna put it on you, bro, and we're gonna pick this up next week. You know, it'll probably be dealing, like I said, a little more with judgment, government, you know, the Constitution, the code, because right now it's still a work going on. We're establishing things, but we conversating the ideas. The spirit is being sparked, right? But we're mobilizing right now. It's inciting something in the brothers to know, okay, this is what we doing. And so I respect all of you brothers, man, especially the brothers and men going God's way. I commend you. I'll tell you early on, it was extremely frustrating because, and then I've learned a level of patience because I understand, I acknowledge how the awakening has come about. You're right. Like it's just really been a thing like, hey, you get the Bible, you know, you try and bring maybe the most insightful lesson or the newer doctrine or a newer way to view things, and then develop esteem to yourself. And so when we early on, you know, elder will reach out here, say, hey, we got these brothers to meet with, or whatever the case might be. And elder would sometimes let brothers know, okay, well, that's good, right? That I appreciate you sharing that scripture with me, or whatever the case might be. But in men going God's way, this is what we're doing first, right? These are the tenets. You don't have to meet them all now, right? If a man doesn't, then we're going to build together until we all do. And when I would see that would cause brothers to back out, I would think I would become extremely frustrated because I'm like, hold on, let me get this right. When you seen that it required action, you sat down. But when you thought it was a situation where you would just come like this is the barbershop and we speak about scriptures, you know, and it's like, okay, I'm like, bro, do you know what your actions are depicting right now? But then when you saying, okay, I have to prove my belief. I have to prove I believe. And even if, and that's the kicker. It's like, bro, if you can't do the workout, if you aren't there yet on this particular metric, that's okay, bro. We all gonna build, we all gonna help, we're gonna get there, but we're gonna take the time, we're gonna study, we're gonna go back, go over some things that, you know, we might have missed because many of us were at different places. A lot of us might have been doing work in a particular place and didn't have time to maybe go back and analyze certain things we embrace. That's okay, but we're gonna go back and we're gonna take step by step. So let me get this right. You just wanted to come, right, lord over people, right, without showing forth the discipline. And when there was an actual standard of action, you step back. I'm saying, and that was the main thing that attracted me to men going God's way, because there wasn't in particular any teachings or doctrine. I just said, okay, I mean, if you have tangible metrics, it'll put you around decent people, because I understand a lot of the quote unquote truth. You know, people believe different things, but you know, the ideology, a lot of it was built upon theory or philosophy to a degree, talking in the battle of this interpretation versus that one. And that's, the conscious community where you get a brother like the brother Polite, who's obviously intelligent and has a degree of intellect, but his actions were never brought up to an equal scale because it didn't matter. They were able to influence people. They were able to sell out arenas based on talking alone. But what would separate the men of the Most High is these men would be exercised in virtue and in the practice of the things that they say. So I said, wow, that's 1 Timothy 3, right? Oh, these principles, and that's a practical method, saying, okay, you will judge a man off of that. And even if even if I don't, even if right now, okay, I make this or I haven't really figured that out, I still have to get some things in order. You brothers still going to embrace me, right? Still going to help me out, right? In a respectful way to bring us all up to par to establish a standard, because that's reflective of a man's true maturity, not the things he says or pretends to know, right? But the man through the fruit. And I said, okay, so wait, brothers was excited at first, right? But then when it came with that, I'm like, whoa, and that was almost offensive to me, because I'm like, what were you looking to do? What were you looking to do? But I get it, I sympathize. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, while you're saying this, you got me thinking about Yasha, right? How he was when he went and found Peter, right? Peter was doing what? Fishing, right? Yes. He was working. So he was able to see this man. I mean, and obviously Nathaniel was where? He was under the tree, right? In whom he had no guile, right? He seen him under the tree. Nonetheless, we're talking about Peter. Peter was found working. Peter was always working. Peter was ready to put in that work. The difference between going into a church or a congregation or a synagogue setting and figuring out what a person is capable of doing based on their knowledge, that takes forever. Right? You have to stay here. You might be here for a year, just quiet, right? Until somebody figure out you know something. I mean, obviously you have a skill. You take care of yourself, right? But that right there, that is so mundane. This, when you presented to me the principles, and I saw that it was going to evoke a man to dig deep within his and pull out that spirit, right? And he's going to do that work. And when I seen Brother Elijah do that workout, and I seen Brother Zedekiah do that workout, and I seen, listen, man, listen, you hear me? Bro, you did it first. But listen to what I'm saying. Every time it was another level. Don't make no mistake. We studied up. We may know what they know and more, but we're telling them to come on.
Right.
Come on.
Indeed.
Bring your body into submission.
Man, I'm on. Elijah, I'm gonna end it with you, bro. So you could take us.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. Brothers, we are at war, right? We have to wake up every single day and know that we are on enemy territory and that we are at war, right? Now, the Most High has been gracious enough to give those who are obedient to him in accord with his word a hedge of protection, a covering, right? But we have to know that the enemy is as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. So we have to be sober minded. We have to be circumspect. We have to be temperate. And while we are here, while we have opportunity, we have to take full advantage. Cast your bread upon the waters, and it shall return unto you after many days, right? And it's not just spiritual enemies that we have to worry about, that we're at war with. We're at war with ourselves, right? As Akamah said, our own members are warring against us. So we have to constantly keep these things in check. We have to constantly examine ourselves and see whether or not we be in the faith. And just keeping it to the topic of tonight of education, I like to end it off with this scripture. And this is the book of Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus, chapter 24 and verse 34. And it reads, "Behold, I have not labored for myself only, but for all them that seek wisdom." For all them that seek wisdom or learning. So everything that you do, all the learning, all the education, take full advantage of it while you can. And, of course, do it for the glory of the Most High, first and foremost. But just know that it's not just for your own benefit. It's not to show how intelligent you are. It's not to speak eloquently and show how articulate and all of these things, great swelling words, but it's for all those that seek wisdom and learn. It's for the greater good of the body. I'll end with that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate that. Again, I appreciate you, brothers, man. I really appreciate it. Coming on and edifying it. It just brings so much more light to the topic. So shalom to all the brothers in the chat. We appreciate you, spending your Sabbath with us. We pray you all have a blessed evening. Tune into the law class tomorrow as well. And with that, we say shalom. Shalom.
Shalom.
Please accept me, pray you don't forget me, hope you don't reject me, I can come correctly. Please accept me, yeah. Please accept me, yeah. Please accept me, pray you don't forget me, hope you don't reject me, I can come correctly. Please accept me, yeah. Please accept me, yeah. Heart full of contrition, asking for forgiveness. I need your repentance. Made some bad decisions. Whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Heart full of contrition, I need your forgiveness. Asking for repentance. Made some bad decisions. Whoa, whoa. Please accept me, pray you don't forget me, hope you don't reject me, I can come correctly. Please accept me, yeah. Please accept me, yeah. Please accept me, pray you don't reject me, hope you don't forget me, I can come correctly. Oh, accept me, yeah. Accept me, yeah.
Please accept me. Pull up, won't forget me. Pull up, don't forget me. Pull up, don't reject me.